him his proper. Come on in here, man.
What's happening? What's happening?
Come on now.
Pro Bowl, Terrell Owens in the house.
What's the matter? You getting a little bit slow? You don't run as fast? I mean, what's up?
Man, I ain't got no need to run right now. What's happening?
Good to see you, bro.
Good. What's up, Max?
T.O.?
You good? What's happening? What's happening?
Terrell, thank you for making time for us. We're going to get into it right now. So we're going to take a look at some of the best wide receivers. Who better to join that discussion than this man right here? So they're calling it the year of the wide receiver in fantasy. Most drafts will see Antonio Brown go first overall among receivers. Over the past 2 seasons, Brown has scored double-digit fantasy points in 24 of his 32 games. If it's not Antonio Brown, it's most likely Odell Beckham Jr., who's averaged 7+ catches to go with 110 yards and nearly a touchdown per game in his 24 career games. So take a look at the stats here. For perspective, last season, Brown had 136 receptions, 1,834 yards, and 10 TDs, leading all receivers in fantasy points with 243, while Beckham finished with the fifth most fantasy points among receivers with 217. He had less catches and yards than Brown with 96 and 1,450 respectively, but more TDs. So we now welcome special guest here, Terrell Owens, to the conversation. Terrell, who do you think it's going to be? Antonio Brown, Odell Beckham Jr., or is it someone else that'll have the most fantasy points?
I would have to go with Antonio Brown, just with what he brings to the table. I mean, he's a guy that's reliable. He's been consistent. Health has been an issue for some of those guys that you've mentioned. You did mention Julio Jones, but obviously he's up there in terms of guys you want to draft for fantasy. Again, he's one of those guys that can put up some numbers. Odell Beckham Jr., I'm just looking at the number of receptions that these guys are having. I mean, 136, 96. I mean, they're slinging the ball around, you know, in the National Football League these days. So, again, if I had to think about anybody putting up some big numbers, that's Antonio Brown, because he's been consistent.
Over the last 3 years, 110+ receptions per season. By the way, I'm going to bring this up with my man T.O. right here. I mean, I expect him in the Hall of Fame next go-round. I want to put that out there. Let's get that out the way.
Is that the biggest no-brainer?
Come on now. Let me just make sure I say that on national television again, because it needs to be said again.
How dare you play with hurt legs? You were selfish. You were the best player on the field. You were selfish.
Before I ask you, before I respond to Molly's question, based off of what you said about Antonio Brown and 136, Julio Jones, 136, Odell Beckham Jr., 96, do you find yourself wishing that you were playing football at a different time? Like you didn't play back in the day, you wish you were playing now instead of back then because of how much they're throwing the football?
Oh, absolutely. I think you look at, again, those numbers, I mean, that's what pops out to me. Again, when you get the numbers, it's not even really about the yards, because I think if you look at what I did with the number of receptions that I had, I think with what I brought to the table. You know, you talk about the West Coast offense and how I was able to flourish in those systems. Again, to get a bulk of those balls,
right?
Man, there's no telling what I would have been.
Aren't they getting better? Like, listen, you aside, because you, Randy Moss, there are always incredibly great receivers in any era. Right. But it seems to me, maybe because of the emphasis on passing, maybe because of the rules change, it makes it easier.
Rule change.
But they're also, you see high school kids making one-hand crazy catches nowadays. It's like the athletes are getting better and better. And when you look at the competition at receiver now, who's the best one? It's the last guy you saw, Demaryius Thomas or Des Bryant. We haven't even brought those guys up because of Julio Jones and Antonio Brown and Odell Beckham. Is it my imagination, or are the receivers not getting better?
They are getting better, bigger, faster, and stronger. And I think, again, when you talk about myself, when I came out, I was labeled sort of like a prototypical type of receiver. That's how I named my clothing name after just some of those attributes. Again, that's what receivers possess. And those guys, those little kids now that are looking up to guys like myself, the Odells and Antonio Browns and Julio Jones, these are the spectacular plays that they embody, they possess. But again, there's a skill set that comes with that. So you think about just the size of Odell Beckham.
Yeah.
You look at their size in general. These are things that are allowing them to really flourish at a very high level.
And I'll tell you something else too, Max. He had 1,078 receptions in his career over 15 years. At the weight Antonio Brown is going, talking about a dude that's going to have over 1,500 receptions in his career. It's just insane. Yeah. Let me get back to the original question about the receiver that I would pick. I'm torn. Because Antonio Brown's a bad boy, and I'm a lifelong Steelers fan, and I know what he can do, and I know what he's going to do as long as Big Ben Roethlisberger is there throwing in the football. You got to remember, he did it last year without Big Ben Roethlisberger starting 5 games and missing 4 complete games and then I mean, come on now. So, I mean, he did that without Big Ben Roethlisberger for a third of the season.
Right.
But here's the deal where it gets very interesting to me. Le'Veon Bell comes back. You already got D'Angelo Williams there. You got Ladarius Green, who's going to spread you defensively because he can get down the field as a tight end. Wheaton's no joke. Sammy Coates has potential. And then then you get, I mean, Antonio Brown is your number 1 option, but you see what I'm saying? It's weapons everywhere. So they got to make up their mind. We got one football. We're going to run. We're going to pass. When we pass it, we got to feed the beast. Even though we give it to Antonio Brown, we need to make these brothers happy, et cetera, et cetera. The reason why I'm hesitant to pick him is because the Giants don't have that problem, and neither do the Falcons. When I look at Odell Beckham Jr., Victor Cruz got groin injury. This dude, Sterling Shepard, he's a rookie.
He looks like he might be good.
He looks like he may be good. He might get some catches, but we all know where Eli is going to go, especially since they don't have much of a running game. So then I go to Atlanta. Well, where the hell's their running game? And then we got, and by the way, my man Roddy White is no longer there. I mean, so who's the number 2? And then you're
I see it the opposite. I see it the opposite of that because Eli spreads the ball around and they don't have a great offensive line. No. It's getting better, but the Pittsburgh Steelers have a really good offensive line, and you got a receiver who's not going to be available, the number 2 receiver, right? And Le'Veon Bell's not going to be there for 4 weeks.
Let me go back to your point. Let me go back to your point. Eli would spread the ball around if you had. I'm questioning who you're going to have to spread the ball to. So in other words, it's like T.O. being out there. When we were excited because when T.O. went to Cincy, you had Ocho Cinco on the other side. But so you were wondering, is he going to get any touches? How many touches he's going to get? How many? No, if you in Atlanta or you in New York, where the hell you going if you Matt Ryan or Eli Manning? You going right to Julio or Odell. Am I lying?
Yep, yeah, you're right. You're going to your moneymaker. You're going to your breadbasket. And those are the guys, again, if you don't have a number 2 option and those guys are dependable, and then if you don't have a running game to go with that, then you're going to go to that target. And that's why these guys' numbers, their targets are going up every year. That's why those numbers are going up every year. And, obviously the touchdowns, it depends on what they do with it. But obviously there's been a big inflation in the number and the amount of yardage.
How about, speaking of Odell, how about his nose for the end zone? Like, he still caught more touchdown passes than Antonio Brown last year. Odell is younger, he's bigger, and listen, all these receivers are incredible, but if you ask me just to eyeball it and say natural talent between Antonio Brown and Odell, I'm going Odell. He's just, he pops a little bit more. But you got to look at the system. You got to look at the system and what they have available to them and what have you. It's just like when you were playing and sometimes you had an issue with a particular quarterback here and there. What was the reason? I'm open. Give me the ball. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, especially if you know the dude on the other side ain't on your level, you're like, wait a damn minute, what you throwing him the ball for? I'm right here.
I had to tailor my game, to the quarterbacks. Chad and I, we just went into a debate about that. Again, he had a guy that he played with for a number of years. I knew with every year or each team that I went to, I had to tailor my game around the quarterback. So being with the Niners, obviously I played with Steve Young. There was a different style of quarterback there. I played with Tim Rattay, different style of quarterback. Then you factor in Jeff Garcia. So now our whole game plan is tailored around his game, so I have to adjust my game.
Stop right there. All the quarterbacks you played with, who was the most difficult one to adjust to?
The most difficult? The
most difficult for you as a wide receiver to adjust to of all the quarterbacks you played with?
I would probably have to say Jeff.
Jeff Garcia?
Yeah.
Because?
Because he wasn't the traditional, again, when you talk about West Coast offense, you think about what has been established there from Joe Montana, Steve Young. These are drop-back quarterbacks, pocket passers. For myself, that's not Jeff's game. So as offensive coordinators and the head coach, they had to change our system based on his abilities, whether they were strengths or weaknesses. So again, when we knew he couldn't stand back there and throw it 50, 60 yards down the field. So again, we had rollout passes, we had short passes to get him comfortable, get him involved early. And then when plays broke down, then we had to adjust to his game. The West Coast system is based on.
So it was more about him instead of about the receivers.
So this man put up those numbers before they were slinging it like this, and with different quarterbacks all the time, not like Odell and Antonio Brown. So far in their careers, same guy under center.
So it sounds like you guys are going Antonio Brown, though. Terrell, thank you for rushing over here for the insight.
I said
Antonio, and you went Odell.
Odell or Julio.
Right, you mentioned somebody I wanted to bring up, Julio Jones. If he stays healthy, trust me, he will be in
the guy.
conversation.
No question.
No doubt about it.
Question.
All right. Thank you, guys. When we come back, we're going to switch to reality. Coming up, Aaron Rodgers says NFL players might be afraid to speak their minds on social issues. We'll react to that.
He's not allowed back. He might take our job.
Right?